Hello, everyone. Tonight we're in John 21 and only John 21, so that's rare lately. But we're looking at the 7th of the 10 recorded post-resurrection appearances of Jesus, which is recorded. Really, it's basically the entire chapter of John 21. I guess technically it's 1 through 23, but there's only 2 verses after that, so it's pretty much the whole chapter. So like I said, it's the 7th appearance, and the first one was to Mary Magdalene in John 20, verses 11 through 18. Then to the other women was the second one. The third one was the one that says to Simon, that we're assuming was Simon Peter, without any other details recorded, or any details at all. Then the fourth one was to the 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus. And then Sunday afternoon we saw the 5th and 6th, which was to the apostles minus Thomas, and then to the apostles plus Thomas. And now the 7th, which is to 7 of the 11 apostles. The first 5 took place on Resurrection Sunday. The 6th one, 8 days later. And then this one, all we know is it took place after the 6th one. That's all John tells us. After this. And that's as specific as he gets. So could have been very shortly after, could have been a month after, or almost a month after. We don't know. But it was sometime after the 6th one. And we looked at this a little bit on Sunday morning because the sermon was taken from this chapter, but we didn't really look at a whole lot of the details. If Jesus were to ask you the same question he asked Peter in John 21, do you love me? How would you answer? But before you tell yourself what you would say, you have to remember, Jesus knows all things. He understands your heart. And so you can't lie to him. You can lie to people. You can lie to most people and get away with it because most people don't really know you. And even those that do know you, you might be able to get away with lying to them. But this is Jesus we're talking about. Asking you, do you love me more than these? That's one of the main points we're going to be seeing in this appearance, which isn't really about the appearance itself, but this is one of the appearances that the most significant things are what happens in the appearance, not so much the appearance itself. Kind of the same way with the 6th one with Thomas, and the 5th one for that matter, is not so much that Jesus appeared, but what happened when he appeared, what conversation took place. So just like we saw with the last one, seems to have been primarily for the sake of Thomas, who was absent for the one before that. This appearance seems to be for the sake mainly of Peter, which seems pretty obvious based on the latter half of the account here. So we'll just look at it here and see what we can draw from it. John 21, starting in verse 1, says, After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias, and he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I'm going fishing. They said to him, We'll go with you. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore. Yet the disciples didn't know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, Children, do you have any fish? They answered him, No. He said to them, Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved, therefore, said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. And the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards off. When they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place, with fish laid out on it, and bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you've just caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now none of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. I think we can probably stop there for just a second. This is the main portion of, I guess, the appearance itself, where when he appeared. Location and time, we already touched on that a little bit. We don't know the time other than after this. But what we know about the location is that it was the Sea of Tiberias. Anybody know what the Sea of Tiberias is?
Sea of Galilee.
It's another name for the Sea of Galilee. So we're at the Sea of Galilee again. One of the most common locations of events in Jesus' ministry in the New Testament. Such an iconic lake, which is really what it is, a big lake, is the Sea of Galilee, and that's where they were. They knew it well. That's where they were again. So now we know this appearance is unique in the sense of it happened at Galilee. First one so far. All the others so far, the first 6 were in Judea, or at least 5 and 6 seem to have been in Judea. But now, just as Jesus had told the disciples that he would meet them in Galilee back in earlier, and the angel mentioned it as well, it seems that after about a week, based on the 6th appearance taking place 8 days after the resurrection day, they finally made their way back up to Galilee. So now that's where they are, on the Sea of Galilee, fishing, after the 6th one. The characters involved, all of them but 2 are named. Not sure why that would be. But we've got Peter, we've got Thomas, we've got Nathaniel, who is believed to be Bartholomew of the 12. Maybe isn't, but most seem to think there's a strong case to be made that is Nathaniel and Bartholomew are the same person. Then we've got the sons of Zebedee, so James and John. And then we've got an unnamed disciple, number 1, and unnamed disciple, number 2. Now, maybe they were of the 12 or the 11 at this point. Maybe not. It sure seems like Andrew would have been one of them, in my opinion, because he's the only fisherman apostle that's not mentioned. But at the same time, Andrew is usually one that was named when he was involved. However, any guess is as good as any other, it seems, whenever they're not named. So these 7 disciples are sitting around in Galilee, it seems, and Peter says, "I'm going to go fishing. I don't know what else to do. Don't know how long they've been in Galilee at this time, but it's almost like they're sitting there. Nobody has anything to talk about at this point. They've probably talked about everything they could over these last 8+ days with no explanation of what anywhere beyond what they knew before. So it's just like Peter says, "I'm going fishing. I'm tired of sitting around." And they said, "Hey, we want to go. We'll go. That sounds nice, you know. Keep us busy." That'll keep us busy, keep us occupied. And that alone just shows that they didn't know what they should be doing. And Jesus, to this point, remember, he anticipated the Great Commission earlier when he said, as the Father sent me, I'm sending you, or I'm going to be sending you. But that hasn't come yet. So they're still obviously not certain what they should be doing with their time. Now, we're looking back at it knowing that there's 40 days worth of appearances, and then Jesus is going to ascend into heaven. But in real time, to them, it's just, they didn't know that. Jesus didn't tell them. Just a couple more weeks, a few more weeks, and it'll all make sense. He's just appearing to them here and there, and now they go to Galilee, and he meets them here at Galilee when they're on the sea. So they're there, they're fishing, they don't catch anything at all night. They caught nothing. No thing, not one thing, not one fish. Now, I don't know if there had ever been a time in their career that they ever fished all night and caught not a single fish. Maybe that was common. Maybe not common, but maybe it had happened a few times in the past. I don't know. But at any rate, they didn't catch anything this time. And here the sun's about to come up, or is coming up, and there's Jesus on the shore. Or to them, a man standing out there. Now, that probably wasn't uncommon. Early morning is typically, I think, a time when people go fishing. I don't know if it's the same over there. But a man's standing out there. He asks them if they caught anything. They tell him no. He says, cast the net on the right side of the boat. I think sometimes isn't there a song that's like a kid's song that we sing about casting on the other side? I don't know if that's the word that's used in the earlier occasion where something like this happened. But he doesn't technically, in this case, say the other side. He just says the right side of the boat. And they cast the net on the right side of the boat. And that net was totally full. And this is when John realizes that disciple whom Jesus loved, which, as we've pointed out, is always appears to be John, the writer himself. He never calls himself by his name. Even though he sort of names himself in verse 2 by the two sons of Zebedee, he doesn't say, I was there and my brother James was there. He just says the sons of Zebedee. Now he refers to himself as he has in the past. That disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, that man is the Lord.
But they listened to what he said before they even knew it was the Lord.
Yeah, John doesn't record. And remember, John being one of the 7 men in the boat, he knew what was going on in the boat. He could have recorded, anything that happened between him saying, cast your net on the right side, and them actually casting the net out there. Maybe there was some muttered, remarks.
I probably would have said, we've tried everything already.
No, thanks. Thanks, man. Appreciate your trying to help out, but will you go leave us alone? Because we're tired, and we've been casting this net over and over all night long. We know how to do this. We know what we're doing. But all that John records is they cast it. He said, cast your net over there on the right side of the boat, and you'll find some. So they cast it. Totally full of fish. In fact, John records down in verse 11, precisely 153 fish. Large fish, he says. 153 large fish. And yet the net wasn't torn. But for whatever reason, I guess, there's times where we pointed out how the same thing is happening again, that you would think it would have hit them like reminded them this has happened, but I'm having deja vu here because this has happened before. Kind of like when the feeding of the 4,000 came up, and he had already fed the 5,000 earlier, and yet here they are with all these people. He says, I don't want to let them go away. They might faint on the way. And they still have the same conversation like, where are we going to get food for all these people? Instead of being like, oh yeah, I almost said that, but then I remembered that this has happened before, so we know that Jesus can do it. Well, John, that seems to have happened to John in this instance. And he knew from this happening that he said, that's the Lord. None of the others figured it out, but John knew. And he told Peter, that's the Lord. He's appeared to us again. So Peter, in typical Peter fashion, he puts on his outer garment. The ESV, I actually prefer the ESV, says he was stripped for work. The old ASV just says he was naked. I highly doubt he was literally out there on the boat naked. If I was a fisherman and Peter was my partner, I would tell him, I don't feel comfortable with you out here naked on the boat like this. Put something on. But he obviously he was stripped to some extent, you know. Yeah, it may have been, his shirt, something. He put it on. I don't know why he would put it on before he jumped in, but he did. He put it on. Okay, so if the thighs were showing, that would have been considered naked. Whereas, usually in a context, in our language, in our vocabulary, naked means one thing and one thing only. If you're not, you're either naked or you're not. And if you have anything on, you're not naked technically. But it obviously it was more of an elastic term to them. So stripped for work is a little bit more helpful to understand anyway than naked, even if naked is the word that was used. So he throws himself into the sea. I like that language too. If I wrote it, I would have said he jumped into the sea, but he threw himself. You ever thrown yourself into the sea before? It's not easy to throw yourself, but he did. He swam all the way. He wasn't going to wait for him to get the boat where they could get up to the shore. As soon as he knew that was Jesus, he jumps in and he swims. He's going for it.
That's like an admirable, that's one of the things of him that is awesome, though. Like the fact that he is so like gung-ho.
Yeah, he could have said, Lord, is that you? Come here. He could just, like that, appear on the boat, with them, because he had already done that in the room twice. But no, Peter wasn't going to do that. If that's Jesus, here I come. And there's a pretty good spiritual lesson behind that too, that we'll see. So they get there, and interestingly, there's a charcoal fire going. And if that's not impressive enough, there's fish on it. Now, they hadn't gotten to the shore yet. Where in the world did Jesus get fish to start cooking breakfast? You ever thought about that? Well, the answer is pretty obvious. Probably got the fish from the same place he got the grape juice at the wedding. He got the fish, I guess, to feed 5,000 people with a couple of loaves and a few small fish. Well, clearly, these were no normal fish, I would assume, unless he walked into the water a little bit and he was one of those people that could catch one with his bare hands. I guess that's a possibility. I guess technically he could have pulled it with miraculous powers as well. But he said, bring some of that fish too. So he's cooking them some breakfast. Isn't that nice? Here, have some breakfast. So now they're going to sit down and have some breakfast.
Don't you think it's odd that I can see maybe being out of the boat, the water may distort sound, so his voice may not have sounded the same. They may have been far
It said just as the day was breaking, so I always thought it might still not be daylight enough yet.
Well, it says they were 100 yards out. At least that's what the ESV says. The Greek says 200 cubits. So I guess the ESV translators went ahead and translated that into yards. So 100 yards, that's a football field, right? So that's a pretty good distance that they wouldn't recognize him from the boat, especially depending on how much daylight there was. And even if it was midday, 100 yards. And it kind of goes back to, if you're not expecting to see somebody, you're not going to assume it's them. But then, after John figured it out and said, and now they're sitting there with him, now they know. I mean, they know for sure. And that's why it says, once they're there sitting and having breakfast, they didn't have to ask, who are you? Because they knew it was him. They didn't know it was him before, but John figured it out first, and then the rest. None of the others jumped in, though. And I'm not going to hate on them, because I wouldn't have either. I wouldn't wanted to jump in that sea, the lake. I'd be like, we're coming. We're on the boat. Don't worry. I mean, we're coming in.
If this part is chronological, though, that seems like an odd place to have that question.
Which question?
Or to have that statement that none of them asked, knowing that it was the Lord.
Because they're sitting right with him at the fire. Yeah,
Right.
it's weird.
Well, I mean, I guess it might be. I think it's just referring to the whole, not just while they were sitting there, but by the time they got to the shore. I mean, I guess from the time that they first realized it was him, there was no question at all. So John is just saying they didn't have to ask, who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. But I think I see what you're saying, like if he looked a little different, because I guess because of the word dared, they didn't dare ask him. Almost as if he appeared different than normal, differently than he did in the room whenever he said, look. And so they didn't dare to ask if it was really him, like it was some kind of test. But again, I don't know if there's no indication that he appeared different, like it seems. There's no indication that their eyes were blinded from recognizing him. But based on the language, it just seemed like they didn't recognize him because they were so far away. And then because of that net being drawn up full of fish, the other 6 may have been like, wow, that was weird. But John was like, that's the Lord. This is telling us that that's the Lord. But it is interesting, an interesting statement that he put in there, that none of them were going to ask, who are you? But I just take that to mean they didn't have to ask, because they were so certain. They knew it was him. It was him, and they knew it was him, without any doubt. So they didn't doubt that it was him, and neither should the person reading it, in other words. Kind of like he said in another place too, that he knows his testimony is true, and the one who saw it wrote these things. So Jesus came, took the bread, gave it to them, and the fish. So he's serving them breakfast. He cooked the breakfast, now he's serving them breakfast. This was the 3rd time he appeared to them. Now this is where it takes the turn, and what seems to have been the purpose of this visit or appearance is now about to happen, which is for Peter. So verse 15 says, when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. He said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him the 3rd time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you're old, you'll stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go." This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. There's one of John's trademark parenthetical explanations. Jesus said this talking about Peter's death. So if you've ever read verse 18, John 21:18, and had no clue what in the world Jesus is talking about, John goes ahead and tells you he's talking about Peter's death. Now, it may still leave us a little confused, but at least we know he's talking about the manner of Peter's death, by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, "Follow me." So again, this seems to be the main purpose of this particular appearance. This is Peter's big moment to be restored, really, because that's what he needed. He needed to be, even if we don't look at it like that in a spiritual sense, I think it's absolutely appropriate to think of it in the way of being restored spiritually, because Peter, even though Jesus has appeared to them as a group and possibly appeared to him individually, Peter is still not fully back to not fully where he should be, and this is going to help him get there. "Simon, do you love me more than these?" And we talked about that Sunday. What are these? Could be this, could be that, could be something else. Could be all of them. I don't think it matters necessarily what they are, what these are. It could just be whatever. You love me more than whatever. Any of these things. Anything. But in my opinion, the biggest significance of this is the words used. I just can't. I've read those who also see it as a significant thing. I've also read some who deny and reject that idea, and that the words are completely interchangeable and then there's no significance to a change in the words. I just have not, I can't see how that could be the case, because even if the words are interchangeable, they still obviously use different words. And if you use a different word, that may not automatically mean that there's a difference, but it seems more likely than not that there is a reason. And especially when we get to verse 17, verse 17 doesn't really make much sense at all, in my opinion, unless we understand the change in the terms. And it's an unfortunate factor of English translations that every word is the same. Do you love me? Since the two Greek words are different, it seems like surely there is some English word that could have been used for this instance, this case, to show the distinction between the two words. Just like in John 3:36, Jesus says, whoever believes in the Son shall have life, but whoever does not obey the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God will abide on him. The Old King James and the New King James both translate the word obeyed there, believe. So he that believes in the Son, and he that believeth not the Son. But that's not what Jesus said. So don't translate it two different words with the same word if they're not the same word. Now, I have to admit, these two words for love are much closer together than the word believe and obey, but they are still different. So Jesus asks, "Simon, do you love me more than these?" And he uses the word agape, or the verb form. Agape is a noun, but he uses the verb form of that word. The Greeks had 4 words for love, and they're all 4 different. One word, stergo. I'll just read this. refers either to the tender feelings that parents naturally feel towards their children, or children toward their siblings and parents, or to the bond that unites a husband and wife, and also takes it in sympathy for friends and compatriots. So that's one word. I don't think that word is in the Bible at all, that particular word for love. There's another word, eros, which is also not found. I'll take it back. Stergo might be in the New Testament at least once. This word is not, eros. It is passion and desire. So I'm sure words like erotic and other words like that probably come from that root or whatever, our English word. Then there's philo or philos, which is affection or hospitality. It's friendship or amity. It often refers to affection, pure and simple, attachment, sympathy, kindly attitude. Another lexicographer says it's to have a special interest in someone or something.
Caring, what we would call caring.
Frequently with focus on close association. And then it can be translated, have affection for, like, consider someone a friend. That's the word Peter uses. Phileo, philo. Like or consider someone a friend. Jesus used the word, and I'll just read some of these other definitions for that word. Regard with affection, have affection for, be fond of. So something that you're fond of, or something that you like, or along those lines. And that word is never used as a command in the Bible, by the way. There may be one exception to that rule, but it may be questionable. Then there's agape. Be faithful towards, devotedness, regard the welfare of. I'll read this very powerful statement about that word. It is the most rational kind of love, inasmuch as it involves recognition of, and judgment of value, whence its frequent nuance of preference. The verb agapao most often means value, set great store by, or hold in high esteem. This esteem and goodwill tend to be expressed in appropriate words and deeds. Unlike other loves, which can remain hidden in the heart, it is essential to charity, or to agape, to manifest itself, to demonstrate itself, to provide proofs, to put itself on display. So much so that in the New Testament it would almost always be necessary to translate agape as demonstration of love. Finally, and perhaps above all, while friendship, philos, is properly used only of a relationship between equals, agape links persons of different conditions, rulers, benefactors, and fathers. It is a disinterested and generous love, full of thoughtfulness and concern. With those who are indebted for inferiors, for subjects, this agape, which is first of all consent, welcome and acceptance, is expressed in gratitude. And then, when used of love to Christ, God or Christ, the word involves the idea of affectionate reverence, prompt obedience, grateful recognition of benefits. Love can be known only from the actions it prompts. Christian love has God for its primary object and expresses itself, first of all, in implicit obedience to His commands. It says Christ bids us to agapao, not the other word, because love as an emotion cannot be commanded, but only love as a choice. And this is the best comment, I think, for that word, for the two words. Phileo denotes to have affection for, denoting personal attachment as a matter of sentiment or feeling, while agapao is wider, embracing especially the judgment and the deliberate assent of the will as a matter of principle, duty, and propriety. Phileo being chiefly of the heart, and agapao of the head. So I think that best sums up the two words. One is a feeling. The other is something you do.
I think Jerry Barber one time said something like, the second one is you act in a loving way even if you don't feel like it. Like you're gonna behave in that way or make those decisions feel.
Yeah. Feelings are fickle. They change all the time. Anything can change the way you feel about something. Not that it changes it forever, but this moment you might feel this way, and the next minute you feel another way. And this something, when things are going well, or something pleases you, or something along those lines, you feel in a certain way, especially towards the person who maybe made you feel that way. But then if they do something the opposite, you're not going to feel like that in that moment, are you? Somebody does something to hurt you. It could be a loved one. It could be a friend. You may not feel that same feeling, but you can still show them that agape love. That's why Jesus, when he said love your enemies, he didn't use the phileo word. He used the agape word, agapao, because nobody has that philo love for their enemies. Nobody does. Nobody ever has that I know of. Jesus didn't either. You think when Jesus looked on the scribes and Pharisees with anger before he healed that man's hand, he was bubbling up with warm, tender affection for those men? No way. I doubt he ever was. And yet, he can burst into tears on their behalf because he cares about them in a deeper sense. That's agape. Somebody that can, or like the Good Samaritan, the parable of the Good Samaritan. A Jew's lying half dead on the road. Samaritan walks by. He's not going to feel that warm affection for him, but look at what he did for him. That is agape love. That devotion or care for their welfare. They were enemies in a human way. Samaritans and Jews hated each other, didn't deal with each other. The Jews would pray, among other things, Lord, I pray I don't see a Samaritan today. You got to hate somebody, a group of people a lot to pray that in your daily prayer. But he still did good for him. That is what agape love is. The other love, and that's why we can refer to the other word as a lesser word, a lesser concept. Even though it's in the heart, it's lesser than the other because you can feel that kind of love for someone and yet not look out for their best interest.
Because it's not like a rational, it's not always logical.
Yeah, a man or a woman can have tender affection for their spouse while they're committing adultery with somebody else. So, if that's possible, and it most certainly is possible, clearly that phileo love is lesser than agape love. And that's why when people are commanded to love, that's the word used. You don't have to feel tender affection for them to love them. That's the distinction. So with that in mind, it seems to me to be necessarily significant that the words are different here. So Jesus says, do you agapao me? And Peter answers, Lord, yes, Lord, you know that I phileo you. Or some form of that word anyway. And then he says a second time, Simon, do you agapao me? And he answers with the philo version again. Consider someone a friend or like, be fond of. You know I'm fond of you. And then the third time, Jesus switches and uses that other word, the one that Peter's been using. And this is when John says Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you phileo me? Now, in my opinion, I get that it is possible to come up with the meaning that it grieved Peter that he asked him a third time at all. But if we understand that Jesus switched the question, it makes that verse make so much more sense. He grieved because the third time Jesus asked him a totally different question. But in English, it's exactly the same. Do you love me? But in the Greek, that's a different question than what he has been asking the first 2 times. So it's almost like Jesus is asking him, do you really love me the way you're saying you do? Or do you even consider me a friend? So no, if that's the way of it, no wonder that hurt. And he says, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And there again he uses that other word, the philo word. So, feed my sheep, he says. To me, that just makes John 20, this section, so much more powerful and meaningful when we understand there's different words going on here, and especially in verse 17. Peter could not bring himself to say that he loved Jesus the way that he was asking him. And that's new territory for Peter. Old Peter didn't do that. Old Peter would have said, I love you more than anybody's ever loved anybody. There's nobody that's ever loved anybody more than I love you. And everybody knows it. But Peter's changed. He has been brought low. He's been humbled. Remember, old Peter said, these guys might deny you. I never will. And then look who happened to be the one that denied him. He's the only one of the 12 that did. Now, he didn't betray him the way Judas did, but he didn't live up to his claim. But it seems, he's not going to make that mistake again. But very quickly then, the last little bit with John being thrown in the mix. Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who also had leaned back against him during the supper. This is John just identifying that disciple for us. When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? Jesus said to him, if it's my will that he remain until I come, what's that to you? You follow me. Don't worry about what I have in store for him. It wouldn't be accurate to just say, don't worry about anybody at all. Don't worry about anybody else in any way. You just worry about yourself. That wouldn't be exactly correct scripturally. But at least what I have in store for him has nothing to do with you. So you just follow me. Or at least right now, don't worry about anybody but you. If I want him to hang around on the earth until I come again, that has nothing to do with you, Peter. And then I still like how John very quickly clarifies. Contrary to the rumors that started to spread that Jesus said John's going to live, until Jesus comes again. He said he did not say that. That's not what he meant. But he just said, if it's my will that be the case, then what's that to you? That's what he meant. So he clarifies that for us. So much for the 7th appearance. We can get some applications real quick, though. We need the enthusiasm of Peter when he jumped out of the boat into the water. As soon as he knew that was Jesus, there he goes. Not going to wait. Not going to investigate. That's the Lord. Here I come. He wasn't going to wait for the Lord to come to him or ask the Lord to come to him. He was going to go to the Lord. So we could apply that spiritually. I'm not going to ask the Lord to come to me. I'm going to meet the Lord where he said to meet him. And if we want to get specific, that would be whenever we are baptized into him in obedience to the gospel. That's where we meet Jesus. That's how Jesus said to come to him, obeying in obedience to the gospel. So I'm not going to ask Jesus to come and meet me where I am. I'm going to go to Jesus. That's what Peter did. Of course, all that wasn't exactly what Peter was doing, but he was just giving us a visual aid for that, I guess you could say. Lord always knows what's best. Throw your nets over on the right side of the boat, you'll catch some fish. We need to do what they did. Don't ask. You can wonder, but just do it. Just do it. If God says to do it, do it. Do you love Jesus with agape love? What's the these in your life? Focus on our own dedication to the Lord. Again, devotion, love of the will. Not when I think about Jesus, do I have generally positive vibes in mind. Like, well, I don't hate Jesus. I think I love Jesus. I like Jesus. I like him fine. That's not what agape love is. It's doing. In fact, John says what it means to love God, which would apply to loving Jesus. He gives us the exact definition of that word, of that concept, and it's to obey his commandment, keep his commandments. 1 John 5:3. In fact, that's the definition Jesus gave too. If you love me, you'll keep my commandments. And then he said, the one who loves me, the one who has my word and keeps it is the one who loves me. The one who doesn't love me is the one who doesn't have my has my word and doesn't keep it. The one who doesn't keep my word does not love me. So we got the one who does love him, the one who doesn't, and it's all wrapped up in whether or not we keep his commandments. And that's what John reiterated in 1 John 5:3 and 2 John 6 for that matter.